Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there. Good to be back here in studio. Gary Jenkins, retired Kansas City Police Intelligence Unit detective, worked the mob in Kansas City for, 14, 15 years. And now in retirement, I am still investigating the mob. So, I interview different authors who've written mob books, and I've got one on the line right now, Stone Wallace. Stone Wallace, he's been an actor, broadcast announcer, boxer, celebrity interviewer himself. I've interviewed a couple of celebrities, no big ones, but creative writing guy, media instructor, written advertising for different companies, and he really started out writing westerns, if I remember right. I mean, yeah. He wrote stories. If you ever read Louis L'Amour, which I did when I was young, well, he wrote those kinds of stories. But later he's got into the mob. So Stone Wallace, welcome.
Thank you very much, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you on your broadcast.
Well, it's great to have you on. Tell the guys a little bit about your life, anything you would want them to know about you.
Well, I suppose the most important thing would be that I've always had an interest in the underworld, and it started at a very young age. I was about 7 years old or so when I was visiting my aunt, and she had a library book there about the 1920s. And I was sitting there, and I kind of flipped through the pages, and I came to the section about the underworld, especially the Chicago underworld. And I don't know what it was, but something pretty much clicked at that point, and I just found it incredibly fascinating. And it just kind of stayed with me, and to this day, it has never actually left me. I've been fascinated by the mob, especially the Chicago underworld, and I've done a lot of research into it. In fact, when I was in grade 3, our teacher asked us to write a little short essay about, an important historical figure, and I chose Al Capone, which raised a few eyebrows at that time, but that's how it went, and it just pretty much grew from there. And I became a fan of the old TV series, The Untouchables, and was fortunate later on in life to interview Robert Stack. And it grew from then. It's never gone away. I've always been just totally fascinated by historical mobsters.
Well, interesting, and your book that we're going to talk about has just come out is Hollywood and the Chicago Boys. Now, I know a little bit about that story. These guys, they went out and they extorted the heck out of those film studios out there. They made a lot of money through the unions, and then after the unions, of course, the union extortion can then lead into extorting the employers. And that's what they did. And they knew how to do that in Chicago. But first, you wrote a book about George Raft, the man who would be Bogart. Now, George Raft he had his own real mafia background. So tell us a little bit about George Raft.
Well, I became interested in George Raft back in 1972 when I spent the summer with my aunt and uncle in Chicago, and they were playing a couple of George Raft movies. We never got them here in Winnipeg. They didn't really play those kind of films here too much, but they played Each Dawn I Die, and I forget the other picture, but Each Dawn I Die in particular really just captivated me. I know who James Cagney was and always admired him. But there was something about George Raft in this film, the strength and the presence that he had, that I just became instantly fascinated with him and began researching his life and his career, and finding out he was a very interesting fellow. He did have underworld connections. In fact, that helped bring him to Hollywood back in the 1930s through working with Oni Madden, the bootlegger. But James Cagney, I think, summed it up best about George Raft. He said, George Raft was of the underworld, but he wasn't in the underworld. I believe he was in the fringes because he did help Oni Madden deliver liquor during Prohibition, but he was never actually, a tough guy gangster type, although that's what he became famous for in movies, and plus his friendships with people like Oni Madden and particularly Bugsy Siegel.
Yeah, they would have helped him out there in Hollywood for sure, because Siegel had a lot of connections out there, but before his life was ended in Hollywood. And I read something about where Madden is the one that really suggested that he try his luck in the movies and bankrolled him a little bit till he got a break, which is important. So that's a heck of a story on George Raft, the real gangster who became a movie star. These guys all want to become movie stars. We got one in Kansas City kind of like to become a movie star, but this he did it.
Well, Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel as well apparently had aspirations to get into film work, according to George Raft. He bought motion picture equipment and apparently had George make some footage of him doing various roles. I'd love to see those films. I don't know if they even exist anymore, but he had aspirations to be a film star. I guess based on his friendship with George. Well, if you can act, I can act too. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that never came to be.
Yeah, I think we all think, well, that acting looks so easy. Anybody could do it, but believe me, nobody can do it except the people who are blessed with that talent, in my opinion.
Well, George Raft, don't forget, basically, he was always criticized for his acting. They said he was very wooden. He didn't show a lot of emotion, but he basically played himself. I mean, you look at someone like Humphrey Bogart, he could vary his characterizations from playing a tough guy in The Petrified Forest to doing Treasure of Sierra Madre, The Maltese Falcon, The African Queen. George Raft's films basically had him playing the same character, whether it was a gangster or a hero or a working man. The George Raft personality always seemed to come through in those roles.
Interesting. So, talking about Hollywood, let's start talking about Hollywood and Chicago, boys. How'd you get in it? How'd you do your research? I know this is actually a historical fiction, but it's based on real people and real facts. So, tell us about doing the research on this and what you learned.
Well, again, my interest in Chicago and Hollywood. I love old movies and stuff like that, and of course with my interest in George Raft, and I wanted to write a book that was like a fact fiction dealing with the Chicago mob moving into attempting to take over the Hollywood unions after Capone went away, because Prohibition came to an end, and that was their most lucrative source of income. So, Frank Nitti and Accardo and Paul Rica, they wanted to look into new areas to expand their rackets, and started off with the theater owners in Chicago, but they decided to go beyond that, go right to the source. So in my book, what they do is they send down Willie Byoff to talk to the production head of a studio. It's fact but fiction what happens there, because I wanted to make it a fun book to read. And there've been so many books written about the Hollywood unions and the Chicago mob and everything. So I thought, well, let's do this like a Roman a Cliff. So the facts are there, the people are there for the most part. Some are fictionalized. I use a lot of the real names, of course. I mean, I have Tony Accardo, Rica, of course. Elliot Ness fits into the story, which, of course, in real life he didn't at that point, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to add him into the mix. Then I have a character named Billy Shore, if you've read the book, and he's based on comedian Joe E. Lewis.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was roughed up by Machine Gun McGurn's mob when he wouldn't stay with the club he was at and wanted to move on to further his career, and he was warned if he did that, he wouldn't live to open. And he did survive, but he was, pretty badly brutalized by the hoods.
Yeah, it seemed like they cut his throat or something, didn't they? Or damaged his voice in some manner.
Oh yeah, they cut his throat. They apparently mutilated his tongue. So he started off as a singer, and of course that was the end of his singing career. He became a comedian. And in my book, what I do is I changed him into a producer. He goes to Hollywood to get away from McGurn's wrath, and he and his manager. Because he was given some money by Capone as retribution for what McGurn did to him, he uses that money to invest in a film, and then we move into the whole situation with his film career. And then when McGurn is sent to Hollywood, which of course never happened, but it's in the book, and he wants to set up be the front man for setting up the mob's infiltration into the studios. Mm-hmm. And so he's using his old connection with the Billy Shore character, and it kind of builds from there.
Interesting. That what about your the Hollywood moguls? How'd you deal with them? They were, for a while they were happy just to, they figured there's cost of doing business to keep these mob guys satisfied and keep the union guys coming in. How'd you deal with them?
Well, I basically amalgamate them into one character. Okay. Instead of having them all over the place, like, having Louis B. Mayer being one, Jack Warner being another, Harry Cohn being another, I just put them all into this one character there. I believe his name is, I call him Sam Bast. So he's just the amalgamation of all of them, and so Willie Byoff is the one who deals with him directly. Otherwise, it would kind of get too scattered. So
Yeah.
it's kind of all developed into the one person there, and his dealings with Bayoff and discovering that it's really a mob infiltration scheme, and how he deals with them without going into too much detail and giving the plot away.
Yeah. Don't want to give too much away here. But,
Not too much away, no.
but we want to. I'm kind of curious about the whole thing. Did you deal with the unions at all? The projectionist union, and because they were well known, that's how they got started in Chicago, was infiltrating the projectionist union. And back then, the studios, the national company owned all the theaters throughout the United States. It wasn't a bunch of little individual guys mainly that owned them. The big cities and the big theaters were owned by the studios. So then they needed projectionists to go to work. So how did you deal with the union aspect?
Well, I have one character. That's how you say before they move into the Hollywood situation, they deal with one union representative of the projectors unions. I'm sorry, and that's how they start off. And he's kind of a hard-edged guy himself, and he's dealing with the mob at that point before they decide to move to California and go on a bigger scale. But he becomes a major character in the book as well, and actually it is him that kind of leads to Frank Nitti's downfall through circumstances that are kind of unusual, but again, don't want to say too much as to what happens there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was just I have one character there, and he's a tough Irishman who stands up to the mob when McGurn comes to lay down the law as far as they're concerned.
Now, Tony Accardo or Joe Batters, he in real life, he was able to like stay above and away from all this, and made it through all this. He was more like a young hitter, had a crew or something. When you're talking about back in the 30s, what part's he going to play in this? Accardo is an immensely popular guy.
He's a major character in the book. Oh yeah, absolutely. Good. And talks about how his ascension in the mob there kind of coincides with McGurn kind of losing favor in the mob, which actually happened in real life, in the 30s. Don't forget that Accardo was Machine Gun McGurn's protege, in essence.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he brought him into the Chicago mob with Capone. So yeah, he's an interesting guy. I've always found Accardo fascinating because if you've ever read the book by Bill Romer, The Genuine Godfather, the man really had two sides. Like he was, he could be as vicious as they come, but Romer always said I had a grudging respect for him because he could be a good person too. So I always thought a person like that would be very interesting to kind of write about. So I put him into my book as a character, and I think I present him. It's a fictional representation, but I think I present him very fairly on both sides.
From both sides, yeah. I get accused of that. You only show one side of people, and I interviewed a guy named Carlo Morelli, who, as a young man, was in Accardo's sphere, if you will, and his father was, and Accardo needed somebody to take his daughter to be a prom date for his daughter. Probably the guys didn't really want to take her, and he called this kid in because he knew the kid's dad, and he said, "Hey, I want you to take my daughter to the prom. Here's some money, and I'll have somebody drive you all." And so the guy told the story of him doing that, and I tell you what, Stone, I've interviewed a lot of people that had a lot of different stories, and this guy, he really did that. In my opinion, he really did that. He had too many good details. It was, and then the girl like took off that night and dumped him for a while, and went off some other friends. And he told the kid, he said, "I understand. She's kind of wild."
I think I've heard that story actually. That's right. And the poor kid was, oh my God, I got to tell, you're part of the law boss of Chicago that his daughter ran out. Like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't envy him. I certainly wouldn't.
Really?
I'll say that's one girl you wouldn't really want to date, and because on top of that, she was quite an independent soul from what I hear.
No, she was. She took off with a high school friend in a brand new car that he bought her for a graduation. And it just disappeared for about a week or two. And then finally called back from out in Arizona or something. Oh, he was mad. This could happen to any parent, even Tony Accardo.
Yeah, but he's the one parent you wouldn't want to have to report that to, you know. You know, I mean, we know what happened when people offended Accardo. You know, look at the burglary at his house. I mean,
yeah, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think everybody listening probably or watching knows the story of his house, burglary of his house. And man, a bunch of guys got killed after that. But I don't know, 5 or 6 got killed right after that. I've done one story on it, so guys, you know, look back and see if you can't find that story. It's a heck of a story.
Well, the bottom line is, I mean, after that happened, you're probably living in the safest neighborhood in Chicago. No one's going to be coming around there to do any mischief, that's for sure.
You know what they say, these Italian neighborhoods, these old school Italian neighborhoods are always really safe because they looked out for everybody in the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, and you know it kind of it's maybe a little bit off topic, but it's the same thing like with Las Vegas because I was working with Elvis Presley's songwriter and actress Dolores Fuller on autobiography some years back, and she would tell me quite often. She says, you know, when the mobs ran the casinos, this was the safest city in the U.S. But once the corporations took over, things changed, you know, pretty drastically. And so a lot of people, I think, felt at that time, you know, we're glad we have the mob here, you know, taking care of business as such because people felt safer then. But the corporations took over and it wasn't the same.
And the good thing about the mob, if you will, being law enforcement, probably not such a good thing from my viewpoint, but
that's true.
You know, they didn't worry about such niceties as probable cause or due process or anything.
That's
they
right.
Just broke your hands or kicked the shit out of you. Or
That's right. Yep.
But I mean, you know, it worked.
It worked. I mean, friendship was friendship, but again, like you say, you know, you don't cross them. You know, loyalty is very strong within the underworld, and as long as you do, you know, keep straight and follow the rules, and you're pretty okay. But yeah, you make one misstep, and that can be, you know, bang bang. So
really,
you end up in the desert somewhere.
So I guess, you know, we got this Hollywood and Chicago Boys. It sounds like a really interesting book, and you've got a bunch of other interesting books. Tell the guys a little bit about them, see if you can entice them into something. You've got this. We talked about. We may do a whole show on this Desperados, Gangsters of the Dirty 30s. Is that about John Dillinger and those guys like that?
Well, you know, that's another book that I wanted to look into for some kind of different research. And the thing about that book is I was never there, so I don't know the facts, but I did a lot of research into different areas of that. And a lot of what was officially reported is questioned, is controversy. For instance, the Dillinger was actually Dillinger who was killed outside the Biograph. Well, there's a lot of information out there that kind of says, you know what, he might have gotten away and somebody else was used as a patsy. That would have been Jimmy Lawrence, who resembled Dillinger. Because apparently after Dillinger was shot, his father said, that's not Johnny, his own father. And there were some differences, and apparently he had an appendix scar that Dillinger didn't have. He had a heart condition that Dillinger apparently didn't have because he was quite athletic. So these are the kind of things I wanted to put into that book. You know, Ma Barker, for instance, was Ma Barker really the mastermind of the Barker Karpis gang? Well, a criminal named Blackie Audette said, that's ridiculous. She couldn't even prepare breakfast, never mind putting together a bank robbery scheme. And then there's the Alvin Karpis story. Was he actually personally arrested by J. Edgar Hoover, or did Hoover come out after he was already safely in cuffs to reap the glory? There's a lot of stories there that are just fascinating.
You know what happened there with that? I've been a policeman. I know what happened there. He wanted the glory, and so he had him wait or whatever, or they had him, and then
he was being criticized because, you know, his people were doing the work, and they said, well, Hoover himself has never made an arrest, so they set this whole thing up there. And once he was safely secured, Karpis, Hoover came out, and he was kind of recognized as the hero of the day there. So to the day he died, Alvin Karpis said, no, he said, that's not true. In fact, his exact words were, the story of Hoover the hero is false.
Yeah, I believe that one.
So, like I say, I mean, I wasn't there at the time, so basically all you do is research and
Yeah,
try to throw different, okay, is this the official version? Is it believable, or it
yeah,
could be? I mean, look at Pretty Boy Floyd. There's another story about him that he might have been assassinated
yeah,
because he knew the truth about the Kansas City massacre, that he wasn't involved in that, and I believe he wasn't.
yeah. Well, I bet those agents thought he was, and there was no quarter spared. I got a feeling because that FBI agent, the first FBI agent that ever was killed in that Kansas City
That was,
massacre, and I think they
yeah.
believed that Pretty Boy Floyd was if he wasn't the trigger man on that, he was there, and that was all they needed, and especially back in those days.
Well, that was Raymond Caffrey. Yeah, he was the FBI
Yeah.
agent who was killed. But see, the thing is, Floyd was living well in Kansas City. That was a good hideout for a lot of criminals at that time. They
Oh
were
yeah.
protected if they had the money. So the question is, why would he risk? And he was quite identifiable too. Why would he risk doing an act like that when he was protected and he had a pretty good life there? So as he was after he was shot, apparently in the field there, they asked him, if he was involved. He said, "I had nothing to do with that." And apparently, the original story is then he died, but then I've heard that after that, because he was denying it, that they actually put a bullet into him. So again, true or not, I don't know, but it's interesting to speculate.
Really. So one more about you. You did a post World War II New York Underworld book called Requiem for a Gangster. You want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, that's a total fiction book.
The
It's
total fiction, okay.
it's just a gangster story I wanted to write. It's kind of based on various movies I've seen. I thought I'd take various aspects of films I enjoy and put them together into a story around this one guy who's comes out of prison and wants to go straight, but he falls in with his boyhood pal who's also released from prison, but he's back into the gang, into the racket lifestyle, and the circumstances that bring the main character back into that sphere. So it's just like I say, just a fun read.
Okay, all right, interesting. Well, and you've got a whole bunch of Western books where you guys are interested in Western books. I've got a good friend. I'm going to have to turn him on to you. He loves Westerns. I mean, this guy loves Westerns. So he's retired now, and he's reading, I think, a book a week right now. I have to turn him on to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I enjoyed writing westerns. In fact, I would have probably kept up with them, but both of my western publishers decided to cease publishing western books because they said people weren't buying
Yeah.
cowboy novels, and that's unfortunate because back in the '60s, that's all you ever had were westerns. You had the books, you had the TV series,
Yeah.
movies, and they say nowadays, no, people just aren't really buying westerns, and that's unfortunate because they're a fun genre to write.
Yeah, I bet they are. I mean, I was born and bred. That's why I became a policeman. I mean, instead of getting a horse and a 30-30 and a 45 Colt, they gave me a police car and a shotgun.
Well, you're a modern day lawman. There you go.
Yeah. We were just in the '70s when I came on. All us young guys, baby boomers, we were just young cowboys out there riding the streets.
Well, a modern day sheriff. You can't do better than that. That's for sure.
Really.
Yeah, I was reading your background. I was very impressed. I thought, wow, you did a lot in your life too.
Oh, I've done a little bit. I guess I get bored easily. I think always looking for another challenge.
Well, that's the way to keep active and young. There you go. You can't say there's anything wrong with that. That's for sure.
Really, I even started on working on a screenplay. One of my stories with this guy that's never sold a screenplay, but he's worked on it. I don't know. He's got it done. He sent it off to somebody. He never heard anything back. But you know how that goes. You probably done a screenplay or two in your life. It's a tough world.
Oh, I haven't.
There.
No, I haven't done that, but I still keep on hoping I'm hoping somebody might pick up one of my books for a movie. I wish I could have run into one of the production people here who were filming the Travolta movie, and I would have loved to have maybe given them a book or something. Say, well, here's something you might want to consider for the future. So.
Really? Oh yeah, guys. Stone is the one. He lives in Winnipeg, and he was telling me. I put it on my Facebook page the other day that they're filming this new Tony Accardo movie, and it's about, I think it's going to be something about the murder of JFK, but I'm not sure. Johnny Roselli. John Travolta is going to play Johnny Roselli, we think, and Manny Patinkin, I can never know how to spell that. Just pronounce that name, is going to be Tony Accardo. And they've been actually filmed some shots up in Winnipeg. What else can you tell the guys about that?
I really don't know too much because I actually just found out about that recently. I heard that John Travolta was coming to Winnipeg, but until a few days ago, or maybe a week or so, I didn't even know what the movie was about. So I just did some checking to see, okay, Travolta's in Winnipeg, what's going on? And it's already he's making this movie. It's a story about the mob's possible involvement in the assassination of JFK, and it looks like you've got all these real life characters who are going to be a part of this. So. I don't know too much more than that. I wish I did, but I'm going to certainly be in line to see that movie. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a theatrical film or maybe it'll go right to television, HBO or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I'm going to be watching out for it.
All right. Stone Wallace, it's been a pleasure having you on. One last thing you would like to tell everybody.
It's been my pleasure speaking with you. Like I say, I'm very impressed with what you've done. I admire your background, and I love the fact that you're doing a podcast that deals with a subject that I'm particularly fond of. And if anybody is interested in my book, it's available on Amazon. It's online, and I believe Barnes and Nobles and the bookstores of that type. So if anybody's interested in taking a look at it, it's available there. And I hope that anybody who does read it enjoys it and has fun with it.
All right, Stone. And guys, I'll have links to the Amazon page for Hollywood and Chicago Boys by Stone Wallace. And you can click on his other link on that Amazon page. You can see the other books he's written if you're interested in Desperados, Gangsters of the Dirty 30s, or Requiem for a Gangster, or you want to see some Western, read a Western or two, like my friend Bobby. So thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Oh, and one more thing. If anybody's interested, you can check out my website.
You got a website. Oh, you do. I forgot. I'm sorry. I forgot all about it.
Not a problem.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's www.stonewallace.net, and it talks about the books I've written, some of the interviews I've done with some celebrities, such as Lloyd Nolan, Robert Stack, Anthony Quinn. So it might be interesting if anybody wants to take a peek at that and see what some of my background is. And the other writing I do a lot of freelance for various magazines. Pardon me, I'm a regular contributor to the Jolson Journal and Nostalgia Digest. In fact, their summer issue just has my Dan Dierier story. So if anybody's interested in checking it out, it's there.
All right, that's stonewallace.net. Now, guys, that's .net, N-E-T. Don't do .com.
That's right. That's right.
Because I've made that mistake before. Well, there's no website here. I've done this on with somebody else, and that's the .net. All right, Stone, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Gary. Thank you.
All right, good. Don't forget, I like to ride motorcycles, so when you're out on the streets there in your big F-150, watch out for those little motorcycles when you're out. If you have a problem with PTSD and you've been in the service, be sure and go to the VA website, and they'll help with your drugs and alcohol problem if you got that problem, or gambling. If not, you can go to Anthony Ruggiano. He's a counselor down in Florida. He's got a hotline on his website. If you got a problem with gambling, most states will have, if you have gambling, most states will have a hotline number to call. Just have to search around for it. I've always got stuff to sell. I got my books, I got my movies. They're all on Amazon. Just go and I got links down below in the show notes, and just go to my Amazon sales page and you can figure out what to do. I really appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll keep coming back and doing this. Thanks, guys.